Well, if I have to pick one teacher, one person, it would undoubtedly be my father, who always encouraged me to be curious. You know how when we're small, we keep asking why, until people, stop answering our questions. Well, my father never hesitated to address all of my whys from a very young age.
And because of the resilience of my mother, the lesson that she's taught me, sacrifice, determination, resilience, a steadfastness, a hunger for life. These are the lessons that I keep with me to this day. She's my first and best teacher, and always will be.
But Mrs. Ben was someone who thought we could do anything. She insisted that we all be in the chorus. So here we are in a segregated school in West Philadelphia, all learning to sing Latin songs. She took us all around the city, places we'd never been. She was generous, she was stern, she was just an exciting teacher because she just stretched and pushed us to our limits.
Mary Hindle, 1961, I was 10 years old. Mary Hindle was an extraordinary teacher for the time. She did projects, topic work. We worked on class newspapers together in the school day. I actually edited the travel section, even though I'd never actually then been anywhere in my life. We engaged with nature and with nature study. We did theatre, we did drama. She really knew how to engage all the children in all of their work, and it inspired me really to want to do this sort of work for a living and to be the kind of teacher that she was, and to know not only how to get the kids to achieve, but how to get them engaged in and really excited about their learning.
Mr. Isaacs invited a ragtag army of students in the spring semester of our senior year to partake of a semester-long course on the masterpieces of American literature. And one of the works that he introduced us to was Henry David Thoreau's masterpiece, Walden. Walden Pond is behind me now and has been a place where I have come swimming in every season, where I have hiked often. My daughter, Sky, her name, I thought up while doing backstrokes in Walden Pond. And this is a big shout out to you, Mr. Isaacs, for inviting us into your home on Wednesday evenings and for letting us argue.
When my 7th grade teacher, her name is Elise Kent, sat down next to me and started chatting, and she said, I like some of the kind of writing that you've been doing in my class. She was my language arts teacher. And she said, what would you think about starting a school newspaper? And you could publish some of your writing in that paper, and you could work with some of the other kids and get their interests and find out what they would like to write about. And in no time at all, I got involved in that project, and suddenly a lot of the energy that was getting me in trouble, fights on the playground and arguments with other kids, seemed to be replaced by what is more positive energy.
But luckily, I was a long distance runner about 40 pounds ago, and I met Coach Molson. Ron Molson was a coach at Hudson Valley Community College, and when I started to run with him, I was academically ineligible to run. But he said, if you go to the Learning Assistance Center and get some help, I'll let you run with the team. And I walked in with a 1.7 GPA, and I walked out with a 3.86 that semester and went to nationals for cross country. Coach Molson had a huge impact that still lasts today.
Ruby Lou lived across the street from me. When I was 5 years old, she was 6 years old. And I remember when she taught me how to ride her bicycle. She showed me that if we went up to the top of the little hill on the road that ran between our houses, and if I got on her bike and coasted down the hill and then continued to pedal, that way I would get enough momentum up that I would stay upright, and then I would pedal, I would continue pedaling as long as I could. Within a couple of days that way, I was riding. This is a nice example of how children who are just a little bit older than us, who've just recently learned something themselves, are often our best teachers.
And we would try to answer all these questions, and then he would come back with his own answers, and his answers were so profound, so beautiful, so symmetrical, so powerful that we were left thinking, wow, this is a great teacher. Very few teachers have had that kind of impact on me. I mean, I will always remember his view of the smoothness of the coastlines of Africa and the shallowness of the waters of those coastlines, as opposed to the deep fjords of Europe, where you had these large ports. Mr. Frank Tharp, I thank you for inspiring me and giving me the tradition to always study and investigate further when we have a question about the role of Africans in the world.
I was tremendously influenced by the way he interacted with his students and colleagues. He was always made you feel welcome, was interested in what you were doing, would talk with you about what he was reading, what he was thinking. It was completely flat. There was no sense of hierarchy. He was the big professor. He was just another person who you could have a relationship with, social, personal, and intellectual. And as I say, it's been a privilege to be able to do this with my teacher, Jerry Bruner, for 50 years.
And on everything I wrote after that, with the end of high school, BA, MA, dissertation, every single paper, every single book I wrote, I thought about what I call the Alice Cooper syndrome. Bring the example that nobody expects to find there because of the context. In other words, what my good old teacher, Marcel Cordier, taught me is amaze the reader. Amaze people around you. And in fact, I realized afterwards how much I love to be amazed myself.
So when I was in kindergarten, I had a teacher, a lady by the name of Mrs. Bertil, who was very light-skinned. She had blue eyes, straight hair. And this woman had decided that she did not like black children, although we were all black in the classroom, and that she would sit us by our skin color. So the darker you were, the farther away you would have to sit from her. And this, of course, had a tremendously negative impact on all of us, I am sure. And it certainly gave me this very, at a very early age, this consciousness about racial inequalities and racial injustice, which is probably why, I have spent so much of my time talking against white racism and the internalization of racism by black people.
When I think back about who was the teacher who influenced me most, I think of Mrs. Wilson. She helped shape who I am. She helped mold my future. And she really inspired my career. But not always in a good way. She was my 6th grade teacher who seated us around the room in IQ order. She made us rivals with each other. She made us focus on being smart rather than learning. But she made me question what learning was all about, what intelligence was all about, what teaching relationships among people were all about, and led me to have insights I would not have had otherwise.
A lot of teachers had an impact on my education, and not all of it was positive. As a matter of fact, I had a lot of teachers that were negative, and that was particularly in elementary school, because I was a child that had a really hard time sitting still. And also, I ended up spending a lot of time sharing my ideas with other kids. That was called talking. And that was not considered okay, so I ended up spending a lot of time in the principal's office. So my worst experience was when I was put underneath a teacher's desk for a few hours, and that was to keep me from talking and to keep me from collaborating. And so what I ended up doing was I ended up promising myself that when I grew up, I was going to figure out a system that was going to help all students be creative and be able to interact with each other and be
have school be much more exciting and fun.
When I think back on teachers that have made an influence in my life, I have to think about Miss Watkins, who was our 6th grade teacher. I grew up in Washington, D.C., and it was during the Vietnam War, and she had us actually dress up in Army fatigues, and probably half of them were Halloween outfits, but we dressed up as Army soldiers, and she took us down to Congress, and we actually protested against the Vietnam War. It's the kind of field trip that probably would have people up in arms in today's political climate, but it really taught us the notion of speaking truth to power, and really also gave us an understanding of the fact that our opinions mattered.
Quickly, the class very quickly became one of mutual support, sympathy, interaction. Miss Wachter was stern and demanding, but at the same time warm, sympathetic. She encouraged us to set high standards for ourselves, to work hard to meet them, and a word of commendation from Miss Wachter was a treasure, a real treasure, and she opened new vistas, encouraged us to explore them on our own, work together, all together an experience that had a major impact on the way I looked at life and school and learning from that point on.
Dear and beloved friend Fred Rogers, the Fred Rogers of Mr. Rogers' Neighborhood, he taught me lessons that I really never learned anywhere else throughout all the years I was teaching and working with children. And that lesson was not to impose an arbitrary sense of adult intention on a child, not to give a child, like the 50 items of necessary wisdom, but to listen to children and to draw wisdom out of their own voices.